I'm sure others will join in as we start talking about the catalyzing farmer-led small-scale irrigation development in Kenya. The objectives of this meeting are very clear, and I think that's something I need to restate right now. And that's, one of them is to discuss the diagnostic and propose interventions to catalyze farmer-led small-scale irrigation development in Kenya. And we have a model that's, we'll have Gabriela talk to us about. We also want to emphasize the importance of collective action between all levels of government, private sector, and civil society. We also want to, showcase what is the possibility and how we go about it in phases. I think if you saw the video, you saw a few of those things that were very clear. As we begin, I would just want to ask you all to mute your microphone so that we don't have any disturbance when somebody's speaking. Please turn on your videos only when speaking, and it will be projected on the screen. But otherwise, all I would want you to do is to say, if you have any questions all along the way, you have an issue you want to discuss, you have questions, please put them in the chat box at the bottom where it says chat, and we will endeavor to answer them all. At the same time, I would encourage that everybody on the task force is available to answer and respond to the questions. So I guess with that, I want to ask, has Mark joined us?
We will be playing his video.
Okay, fine, good. Great. So I think I just want to introduce Mark London, Regional Director of Sustainable Development from the World Bank. And I guess you can now play the video, Joy, and thank you as we get many more participants joining in. Thank you and welcome. I would encourage all of you to stay till the end because it's not going to be more than 2 hours. But really, we need to get something conclusive and we come up with an action plan. Thank you.
Good morning. Dr. James Nyoro, Chair of the Agriculture and Livestock Committee of the Council of Governors, Cabinet Secretary Cicely Kariuki of the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation, and co-chair of the 2030 WRG Kenya platform, and Mr. Vimal Shah, co-chair of the 2030 WRG Kenya platform. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the World Bank Group and WRG 2030, I'd like to welcome you to the stakeholder event on catalyzing farmer-led small-scale irrigation development in Kenya. Unfortunately, time difference prevents me from joining the discussion today, but I did not want to miss the opportunity to convey to you a brief message. Countries all across the Africa region are impacted heavily by climate shocks, inequitable access to water resources, and critical weaknesses in the resilience of natural resources more widely. The COVID pandemic has amplified these challenges. Countries are experiencing major setbacks on their path towards achieving the SDGs, and poverty is increasing for the first time in a generation and disproportionately affecting vulnerable population groups. The Africa region is expected to face a prolonged and difficult recovery if unequal vaccine access continues. This is why the World Bank has launched an early replenishment process for the International Development Association, aiming for increased support to countries in their recovery from the COVID crisis and the transition to green, resilient, and more inclusive development. In Kenya, 1/3 of the population still lives under the poverty line, and the COVID crisis increased poverty by 4 percentage points. Agriculture has a leading role in poverty reduction. It contributes to more than half of GDP, 30% of GDP through primary agriculture, and another 25% through linkages with other sectors. It employs more than 40% of the population and 70% of the rural population. Agriculture also accounts for 65% of exports. Yet irrigated agriculture is still limited. According to official statistics, only 3% of agricultural land is irrigated, yet it contributes almost 1/5 of agricultural production. Still, the agricultural sector in Kenya is performing below its potential. Total factor productivity in the sector fell by 10 percentage points in the first 2 decades of this century, while it could have increased by at least 20% as in the rest of the world. One of the reasons behind the decline in total factor productivity is the lack of substantial progress in irrigation expansion and associated vulnerability to drought, in addition to soil degradation, suboptimal extension services, and value chain inefficiency. A decisive boost in irrigation expansion is key to reserving this trend. The ambitious target set forward by Vision 2030 in terms of irrigation development goes exactly in this direction. Ladies and gentlemen, current agricultural expansion through irrigation is also well below the Vision 2030 targets. A further increase in public funding to the irrigation sector is unlikely, considering the strain put on public resources by the COVID pandemic. Moreover, the institutional setup and public staffing may not be able to sustain a substantial, faster dynamic. In response, Kenya needs to identify models which are financially, institutionally, and environmentally sustainable to support a long-term scale-up of irrigation. Farmer-led small-scale irrigation development is part of that solution. All across the Africa region, farmers are developing irrigation themselves, filling the gap where public-led irrigation services haven't reached or been able to improve these services where they do exist. We see the same dynamic in Kenya. Accelerating farmers' action in irrigation holds substantial potential for short-term recovery for the most vulnerable farmers, and in the longer term, can help to safeguard domestic food security and strengthen farmers' ability to recover from shocks and adapt to a changing environment. Kenyan farmers may be primarily smallholders, but their collective contribution to food production and income generation is massive. Ensuring that smallholder farmers are in the best conditions to develop irrigation themselves can be pivotal to facilitating their transition from subsistence to more commercial agriculture and achieving the Vision 2030 targets. The public sector can assist with an enabling environment, such as through institutional support for water user groups, so that smallholders can take the lead in irrigation development. And the private sector can support this effort both through working with producers groups and by tackling the difficulties of credit and input provision. Promotion and integration of these efforts in Kenya needs to be based on recognizing the different challenges farmers face across the country and proposing targeted interventions. Farmers in the arid and semi-arid lands have different challenges than farmers in the non-ASAL regions. Women and youth also face different opportunities and challenges, and farmers next to major population centers have different concerns compared to those in remote areas. But I'm glad to see that the document at the focus of this event recognizes there's no one-size-fits-all approach and proposes rather a range of interventions that can have a real impact on Kenya's pathways to irrigation expansion. So as we gather today, let's focus our ambitions on achieving transformation at scale, as farmer-led small-scale irrigation development can reliably contribute to half the targets set forward by the Vision 2030. Lastly, action to catalyze irrigation expansion needs to be based on sustainability in land and water management. In this quest for sustainability, the World Bank is financing a range of multi-sectoral engagements promoting agricultural commercialization, sustainable land and water management, and locally led climate adaptation, with $1 billion portfolio under implementation and another $300 million in the pipeline. We're committed to supporting Kenya to identify effective strategies to scale up small-scale farmer-led irrigation development, making it a faster, cheaper, more sustainable, and inclusive process. So in closing, I wish you successful deliberation at today's event. May this be the first of a long collaboration between farmers, the government of Kenya, the private sector stakeholders, and the World Bank Group to catalyze a new model of irrigation development.
Thank you. I think that's very clear. We need to catalyze farmer-led irrigation. I would next invite, although we were expecting the Chief Administrative Secretary from the Ministry, Andrew Twimore, to join us. Joy, has he joined us?
Not yet, and I suggest that we come back
to him. We'll move on to the presentations. There are two presentations today. I think one of them is Irrigation Development in Kenya by Abud Moeva, who is the Irrigation Secretary in the Ministry of Water and Sanitation and Irrigation. And thereafter, I will invite Gabriela. So Bwana Abud, please go ahead and make your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vimal. Good morning, colleagues. As I've been told, my name is Abud Mweva, the Irrigation Secretary. First and foremost, let me convey my apologies for the Cabinet Secretary who was supposed to have joined us today. Unfortunately, because of other issues that were beyond her control, she has been requested to attend a physical meeting elsewhere at this moment. Yeah. So our sincere apologies for that. But I'm expecting our CAS to join us in the course of the meeting if he has not already joined us. Secondly, let me take this opportunity to thank. I think I can hear his voice. Secondly, let me take this opportunity to thank all the stakeholders that we engaged with. They were very, very helpful in coming up with the report that we're going to present to you today. And we really appreciate their contribution, especially the private sector, where we realized a lot of work actually is already going on in terms of supporting fleet in this country, but very, very informally. So I think it was an opportune time to interact with them, to get their views, and we are looking forward for us to work together so that actually we can catalyze or accelerate fleet in this country. Lastly, let me also sincerely thank the World Bank Group for the support they gave us. I think we owe them a lot. It has been a very good journey for the last 6 months, and we've learned a lot. And we hope after this, we should be able to move to the next phase of implementation. So maybe you could project the slides. Hello? Joy?
The slides are already up.
Your first slide. It's up. Can you see it on your side?
I cannot see it on my side. But maybe okay, let me just continue. I cannot see it on my side, but let me just continue. Maybe it will pop up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a brief presentation of the Kenyan situation so that we can appreciate where we are and where we would like to go. Basically, Kenya has a vast potential for irrigation. As per the National Water Master Plan 2030, we have about 1.9 million acres that can be harnessed without storage. So far, we are at around 560,000 acres, and most of these projects are under the smallholder irrigation schemes. Under the Vision 2030, we expect to go up to around 1.9 million acres by the year 2030. And that is the journey that we would like to move together. As far as irrigation development is concerned, out of that 560,000 acres, about 90% of it actually is either under smallholder or private sector control. Smallholder irrigation projects actually cover about 56%. And then the private sector, this is the commercial entities like the Kakuzis and the rest, they form about 34%. So the public, which are the large irrigation projects, they only account for about 10% of the irrigation in this country. So as you can see, the focus of the ministry, the focus of the government is on development of smallholder irrigation projects, either through private individual farmers or under community-based irrigation projects. Now, next, as far as the vision is concerned, as we are moving to the 1 million acres, we are having challenges that we actually appreciate that if they are able to be addressed, we should be able to reach the target that we have under the Vision 2030 of putting about 1.9 million acres without storage. But we have noticed that there are constraints in terms of low public funding. There are constraints in terms of limited private investment, which we need to upscale, we need to increase. And then there are also operational challenges of the already implemented schemes in terms of capacity to do proper O&M and also issues of governance. But that withstanding, we appreciate that for us to move forward, we need to move to promote farmer-led irrigation in the country. Why? First and foremost, it is in terms of investment, it actually requires less funding. That is low-cost funding. The fleet is also quite very, very sustainable. In terms of ownership, it is a high degree of ownership when it comes to farmer-led or individual irrigators. And then, as I said earlier, the investment that is required is low. And in terms of implementation, it takes a shorter time to implement the smallholder irrigation projects. Now, let me turn to farmer-led irrigation development in the country, the context. During our exercise, we agreed, as far as Kenya is concerned, we'll define farmer-led irrigation development as one community projects that are developed, owned, and managed by communities. And then the second part, the other part is, we also appreciate farmer-led will be individual farmers that are characterized by small irrigators, that is low cost and initiated by farmers themselves and developed and managed by farmers themselves. So moving forward, we are appreciating that there is a great opportunity to scale up fleet development in Kenya. This can be done by creating an enabling environment for the private sector to support fleet through mobilization of much needed resources to support public sector efforts. Because what has been happening now, most of the interventions in terms of funding has been coming from the public sector. But we also appreciate much is also being done by the private sector, as much as we have not documented it. But from the interactions that we've had, there's a clear indication. A lot of investment is also being done through financials, through equipment suppliers, and we are somehow working together. It's only that we need to concretize whatever we are doing. In terms of policy as a country, for the last 2 or so years, we've been carrying out a lot of policy reforms, legal and policy reforms, to at least to map out the way forward for smallholder irrigation development in the country. In the year 2019, we did have the Irrigation Act assented, and in the Irrigation Act, a lot of priority has been given. We have actually recognized irrigation water users associations as a driver of irrigation development at the county. We've recognized them as an entity that will be responsible for O&M. It will be responsible for managing the schemes in the various counties. We've also recognized the counties through the county irrigation development units to be the drivers of irrigation development at the county level, more so small-scale irrigation and individual farmers. And this one has come out very clearly in the irrigation strategy that we developed this year. We've also developed the irrigation guidelines and the irrigation regulations. And all these documents are in our website, and they're giving a lot of emphasis in private sector involvement, a lot of emphasis in county involvement and individual farmer involvement in irrigation development in this country. In the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of investment has also been done. And for the ones who are able to see the graph, the government has progressively been increasing the funding towards smallholder irrigation schemes. As indicated earlier, they are the ones that get the bulk of the funding in the country. And just to give an example, we have, I've just given about 4 examples. There's the Turkana Irrigation Development Project in Turkana. It's an example of the community project that we are doing. The household water harvesting project. These are individual irrigators. These are very, very successful projects that we started about 2 years ago. And so far, we've managed to do about 26,000 household water plants, putting about 26,000 acres under irrigation. There's that potential right now at a cost of about 4 billion. We've also done about 170 irrigation projects, community irrigation projects specifically, over the last 6 or 7 years. And then there's also the smallholder irrigation program that we are usually very proud of, because this was done through the loan system with the support of KfW, and we managed to do about 19 irrigation projects under this loan system, which now can be used for benchmarking and moving forward if we want, as the way we're emphasizing that we need to cost share moving forward in terms of project implementation. And that's a very good example where farmers took loans that they managed to pay, and the schemes are still moving on very successfully. Now, what we really need to appreciate that irrigation development is a multi-sectoral thing. It requires involvement of various stakeholders, and we need to come out with our roles very clearly. And we have confirmed that as far as the Irrigation Act is concerned, the issue of policy formulation is actually an issue that has to be handled at the national level. And we at the national level have been at the forefront. And as I indicated earlier, we've already undertaken a number of policy and legal reforms in conjunction with the counties. The regulatory function is also the responsibility of the national government with the support of the county governments. And then lastly, the issue of implementation. This is where now we have to hold our hands together and move together, because as far as the Irrigation Act is concerned, we have the National Irrigation Authority, which we recognize as the main implementer at the national level. And then we have the county irrigation development units for the counties. We have the private sector. We have the development partners, and of course, the individual investors. So in terms of roles, they have already been delineated. So as we move on with the conversation, we know who is to do what and at what capacity. So with that in mind, after we had our meeting, the board meeting, the Water Resource Group board meeting at sometime October, we were guided that we need to come up with a fleet diagnostic just to appreciate what is happening in the country and also come up with interventions that will enable us to accelerate fleet development in Kenya. And I'm happy to say that in the last 6 months, the team has worked quite well. We've managed to carry out diagnostic surveys. We've interacted with a number of stakeholders, as I said earlier, all the way from the private sector, a lot of government entities, and we've got a lot of information from them that we're going to share with you today. So I think at this juncture, let me now give the baton to Gabriela, who was very, very instrumental in guiding us in this process. And at this juncture, I would really like to thank her for the support she gave us and the experience that she shared with us in the development of the report that we're sharing with you today. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Bwana Aboud. I think there's a lot of work that's been done. However, I would like to recognize Gabriela Idzi, Senior Irrigation Specialist at the World Bank. She's going to talk about diagnostics and key interventions, and she's got some models. And she's in Italy right now celebrating the Italian win. Gabriela, welcome.
Maybe she's still celebrating. Gabriela, can you hear us?
Yes, sorry, I had an issue with my mute button. So let me just put on the video just 1 second so we can properly greet each other. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And it's a real pleasure to be here and presenting on behalf of the whole task force these 6 months of work. If you allow me, I'm gonna switch off the video so to have better connection, and we can start having a look at this diagnostic for farmer-led small-scale irrigation that was carried out over the past 6 months, as well as the interventions that were identified in order to help farmers overcome the major constraints that were identified during the diagnostic. Let me allow to start from this slide which links very directly to what was just presented by Mr. Moheva. Kenya has a huge challenge ahead in terms of irrigation development. And indeed, back in 2008, the Vision 2030 put up put up a very ambitious targets when it comes to irrigation expansion. The goal was to expand irrigation at the rate of 100,000 acres per year, so that by 2030 it would have been possible to achieve a 3 million acres target, which would be instrumental to reach the country food security, ensuring improved livelihoods and income for the rural population, as well as contribute to the economic development of the country overall. However, if we look at the actual numbers over the past decade,
Gabriela, can you hear me?
What happened? Have we lost her?
I should
Can
be
we
online
unmute?
again. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Perfect. Perfect. So as I was saying, if Kenya wants to achieve the original target of the Vision 2030, there would be need to expand the irrigation at the rate which is 4 times faster, or in order to reach the original 3 million target, a 10-fold increase of irrigation expansion would be needed. Of course, it's unlikely to think that public resources can be increased by 10 times, but even a 4-time increase in public resources going into irrigation is unlikely, also considering the challenge posed by the pandemic. So we need to figure out ways we need to figure out together new models which are financially sustainable, so to reach the original Vision 2030 targets. So another element that needs to be taken into consideration when thinking about Kenya agriculture and Kenya irrigated agriculture is the fact that agriculture in Kenya is largely based on smallholder farmers. We have 3.5 million smallholder farmers cropping on very small areas. But we need also to keep in mind that the fact that they crop in small farms doesn't mean that their contribution to the economy is not substantial. It's indeed impressive to see that 75% of the country agricultural production comes from farmers who 5 acres. Together, the ambitious goal of irrigation on one side and the large bet on it's absolutely necessary to ensure that these smallholder farmers have access to irrigation, and farmers can develop irrigation so to achieve the Vision 2030 target. In the small-scale irrigation development, which is indeed the model that was analyzed in the task force. Now, let's spend a couple of minutes to explain what farmer-led small-scale irrigation development means. Essentially, we are putting together 2 concepts, small-scale irrigation on one side and farmer-led irrigation on the When we talk about small-scale irrigation, smallholder farmers develops independently irrigation on a 1 acre farm, but you can also think about the groups, and sometimes rather easy infrastructures. This translates in the fact that the unit cost is rather low. Indeed, it's a fraction compared to large scale irrigation development. This is why there is a huge possibility in Kenya to focus on small scale irrigation. Now we are linking it we are linking small scale irrigation with the farmer-led irrigation concept. And sorry, just one technical glitch. It seems that the slides are not working well. So Julia, I'm giving back control to you, and I'm gonna say next. Thank you very much. Julia, you have control now. So when we talk about farmer-led irrigation, what are we thinking about? We are thinking about farmers who take control over irrigation development. So they decide where to introduce irrigation, which technology, they reach out to the irrigation equipment supplier, they raise the money, they have the equipment installed, and they are fully responsible for its operation and maintenance. So the farmer is leading the irrigation development. Now, international experience teaches us that when irrigation is led by farmers, it happens faster, on a larger scale, and it's more inclusive, meaning also women and youth have easier access to the irrigation process. But another element another element which is very important in farmer-led irrigation is the fact that part of the cost of irrigation development
Gabriela, let us know if you're having any troubles.
Technology doesn't seem to be on our side today. Okay, so I was just mentioning the fact that the farmer can cover a good portion. So overall here, the message is that we can use better public money the moment we focus this public money on the support on small scale irrigation development, and we have farmers leading with that, so that we can really leverage public resources. Next slide. Of course, the challenge here is how to make sure that farmers lead the small scale irrigation development process. Because we see that some farmers are indeed developing irrigation, but most of them are still holding back. And this was the core of the diagnostic that was carried out by the task force over the past 6 months, identify not only the potential for farmer-led small-scale irrigation development, but more specifically, what are the constraints that farmers face so that interventions can be identified, so that the government can create that enabling environment that allow farmers and private sector to interact more smoothly. Next slide. So the diagnostic, which was carried out over the past 6 months, focused on various elements that sort of simplify the very complex reality that farmers face. And this diagnostic is summarized in this spider diagram. So let's take a couple of minutes to go through this spider diagram that you see on screen. Now, on the upper part of the spider diagram, what you see is the potential for irrigation development. The potential is defined by the natural resource potential. So if you will, is there water and land to develop irrigation? As well as the potential is defined by the farmer's benefits. Can farmers make more money out of irrigation? And you can see that in Kenya, there is rather high resource potential, while with differences between ASAL and non-ASAL areas. And surely the farmers can make money out of irrigation, of course, depending also from his or her farmer linkages, but potentially quite some money can be made out of irrigation. So overall, that's potential for irrigation development in Kenya. However, what is holding farmers back is defined in the lower part of the spider diagram, where you see 5 factors: policy, legal and institution, knowledge, finance, markets, technology. And here, the lower the score, the more you are towards the center of the spider diagram, the more the factor is constraining. So you can see the lowest score is finance, which means that the main element holding smallholder farmers back from developing irrigation themselves is access to finance. These farmers do not have savings, and these farmers are not able to raise loans to develop irrigation. The second factor holding them back is access to adequate knowledge, which means that these farmers do not find the right information among the public and private stakeholders. And the third element holding them back is markets, particularly when these farmers do not have strong ties with value chain actors and are selling informally. Last but not least, technology, policy, legal, and institutions have been scored as 3 by the task force, meaning that while not perfect, they are not the major factor holding farmers back. Another element to stress is the fact that this diagnostic is a summary of the country level situation. Then a similar diagnostic were carried out at the local level farmers. And of course, a local situation can differ compared to the country level. And this is a major lesson. In order to scale up farmer-led small-scale irrigation development, there is need to propose solutions that can be adaptable to the specific and variable situation of the farmers on the ground. Next slide. So based on these diagnostics, 10 interventions were identified, the so-called framework for action. The idea is that if these interventions are all 10 put in place, this will create a more enabling environment for farmers to interact with the private sector, overcome strains that have been identified in the diagnostic. And farmers would be able to develop irrigation mostly by themselves and contribute to the achievement of the Vision 2030 targets in terms of irrigation expansion. Now, let's use the last few minutes of my presentation to go into more details of only some of these interventions. Next slide. And let's start from linking the potential for irrigation development to the intervention. So the diagnostic carried out an assessment of the potential of water and land. And this assessment allowed the task contribution that small-scale irrigation can give to the Vision 2030 goal, which can be even half of the objective of the vision. But another element which is of great importance is the fact that 2/3 of the irrigation potential allows for individual irrigation, which is something very new in Kenya, as Kenya was traditionally focusing on the support of groups for the development of irrigation. So particularly in the non-ASAL region, in part of the country where surface water is available, their public support should focus on allowing individual irrigators, smallholder ones, to develop irrigation. Different is in the
Gabriela, let us know if you're having any hitches. In the meantime, I think we have a chance to really read what is on this on the screen regarding this intervention. I'll encourage you to keep posting your comments or questions in the chat box as we wait for Gabriela to reconnect.
Joy, I thought we had problems in Kenya, but Kenya is doing much better than Italy in internet. Are you connected with her or?
Yes, we are connected on phone.
Hello, apology again for the internet glitches. I'm back online. I hope you can hear me well now. So you can move to the next slide, Julia. Thank you. So I was saying another element of the irrigation potential is the fact that even if there is water for the development of irrigation in Kenya, water resources are also, there's also increased competition for water resources. And this is why intervention, there are specific interventions that need to be taken hand in hand with the support of irrigation development in order to ensure sustainable use of the resources. And here we see huge opportunity for use of digital platform to track this abstraction by individual farmers, which otherwise usually is done illegally. Next slide. So I would like to use the last two slides of my presentation to focus on the constraints that were identified, starting from constraints on the institutional and knowledge aspects. Here we see that the two main takeaway of the diagnostic was the fact that the irrigation is a shared function between a central and a local government, as well as that the knowledge system around the farmer depends from both the public and the private actors. And this is why you find in the framework for action interventions that foster the collaboration between central and local government, as well as that push local governments to put in place the needed structures required under the new decentralized framework in order to support small-scale scale irrigation development, and in particular, the establishment of the county's irrigation development units at local level. Another element which is very important for the knowledge aspects is the establishment of multi-stakeholders platforms that could bring together farmers, public sector, and private sector. Next slide. I would like to close with one last slide, which talks about the constraints of irrigation development posed by finance, market, and technology. And we are lumping all these up because all these elements depends the one from the other. Indeed, we say that affordability for irrigation development is a big challenge for smallholder farmers, and as they have no savings, and access to loans is difficult, as financing institutions often consider smallholder farmers as risky business and a business with a huge transaction cost. And also oftentimes they consider them as a risky business also because the farmers don't have financial books and sell on the informal market. So when you look at the interventions, you look at interventions that try to increase affordability of the farmers vis-a-vis the investment cost for the most appropriate technological solution. So first of all, you need to increase the capacity of farmers to take loans. This is done by intervention 7, which focuses on developing an alternative financing mechanism by de-risking action of financing institutions, as well as put in place revolving funds that can make life easier for smallholder farmers, but also link them to markets so that they have, let's say, develop collaterals for raising this loan. Next slide. The second element is to allow farmers to cover the gap between what they can afford and what is the actual cost, and thus the provision of partial and smart subsidies can make a difference. And then third, next slide, is to put in place ways to reduce the cost of investments, for example, by introducing tax exemption. Putting all these elements together might increase affordability of smallholder farmers vis-a-vis irrigation development. And with this next slide, I'm going to bring you back to the slide of the framework for action, that it's going to be the basis of the discussion today, in particular what it takes to implement these interventions. And Vimal, I pass it back to you with apology again for the huge technical difficulties that we faced for this presentation, but we arrive at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriella. I think I was just making a comment while you were off that Italy must be celebrating a lot, so internet is down there. But anyway, thanks for that. I think what I would like to now do, thank you, Gabriella, and thank you, Banabud. I will take 2 questions live from people who have questions for Gabriella or for Banabud, and we can make them very crisp and precise. I know we have a few questions on the chat which are being answered directly. But if anybody wants to say something, make a comment or ask a question right now, we have the opportunity for 2 interventions. Just raise your hand, and on the reaction button, there's a raise hand, and I'll allow you to speak. Anyone from our audience? Otherwise, I will take, there are 2 questions here, and I think they've been partially answered. But it's a good question. I think Luciana, you want to say something? Or Esther, you had asked 2 questions. Esther Muindi. Also, I think from SMEP Microfinance Bank, you have a question. So I think both to Banabud and yeah, somebody wants to say something?
Hello.
Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
My name is Paul Omanga from Kisumu County. I have to thank the presenter very much for giving us this good work. Gabriela, Easy, thank you very much. My comment is that in what she has presented, if you look at the individual farmer irrigation approach, it will go for some crops and not other crops. Like in Western Kenya, individual farmer irrigation approach would go very much for vegetable, horticulture, and the rest. But where we grow rice, in the rice schemes, where water is available, and the source of water could be from a river, a group type of irrigation has been practiced a lot. And in this group irrigation, you find we have a scheme with several schemes in it of about 100 acres each. Like we have a scheme in Kisumu County called Southwest Canoe Irrigation Scheme with 40 small other schemes. And managing this has been a problem. And I think this is where we need a lot of assistance. And thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I think that's noted. That's a comment which is very valid. And I think it goes back to the how to manage absolutely the whole irrigation schemes. Thank you for that comment. Any other interventions?
Yes, I have a simple comment.
Michael Mwangi, go ahead.
Good morning. Yeah,
Morning.
I have something to say. My name is Michael Mugo Mwangi. I work for SMEP Microfinance Bank in Kenya. It's a regulated central bank. And this initiative of a farmer-led irrigation project is very, very key. Because if you look at our model for reading, yes, one of the facilitators talked about the banks not supporting smallholder farmers. So I can assure you that we are really working with the smallholder farmers at the ground level across the whole country. Because we have a model we call the group reading model. So we are able to support the smallholder farmers in a small way to harvest water, especially where we have challenges with rain. But all in all, I would like to come to suggest on the issues of public-private partnership so that the financial institutions who are represented here like SNEP just allows the agronomists or the government entities or the irrigation experts to do the technical experts so that the banks just does the reading. Another thing is that these days the banks, sometimes because of liquidity issues, if they're able to get an extra funding, a cheap funding, the bank has all the necessary tools to control the quality of their own book. So if you're able to get a simple funding, we can go ahead and work with the irrigation service provider so that they're able to upscale production. In fact, including even packaging the road so that the farmer can easily get even money for that risk. So generally, that's what I would comment. And the bank, on behalf of the bank management, we are open for discussion to get some cheap funding to do onward reading, and we are able to do the right reports in terms of gender, in terms of youth, and in terms of county coverage to be able to put food on the table for our people. So that is my comment on behalf of the bank. And we are really doing a lot on the ground, but funding is key for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just put him on mute.
Hello.
Vimal, we cannot hear you.
Vimal, kindly unmute.
Oh, sorry. I was talking a lot. Sorry. Thank you, Michael, for that comment. Very important that, if you look at item 6 there, we are talking about creating everybody into farmer-producer organizations, which really can work together and de-risk your model for banking and ultimately get into this whole process. So I think that's something that's going to come out as an outcome of this. So thank you for that comment. I still have time for one more comment if somebody wants to make a comment or a question to our
Hi, Bima.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
This is Michael Gitonga from FAO.
Go ahead.
Now I can see a recommendation or an intervention on the county irrigation development units, and I don't know how the situation is now at the county level in terms of financing, because sometimes the officers or the CECs or even the officers that do budgeting, they claim that once they present budgets to the county assembly, they are normally reduced tremendously, so that they don't have capacity to support small-scale farmers. I don't know how it is, whether the report, I've not seen the entire report, but it may be covering some of these aspects and how to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. It's one of the recommendations. So these are all recommendations for action. And I think it may not be absolutely foolproof today, but going forward, this could be a proposal which could be looked at. And I think it's all about prioritizing, even at county levels, it's prioritizing that. So I think it's one of the outcomes. I'll take one more from Moses Kiteka. We still have some time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Dr. Shah. I'm Moses Kiteka from Davis and Shartlip, and also a small-scale farmer. And speaking on behalf of Davis and Shartlip, I think thank you very much for arranging this presentation. I think it's timely. And one thing that I would say is that we are excited. We have very small farmer-friendly kits that have been there, and we are continuously developing so that they can meet farmers' pocket requirement. So we are very, in brief, we are very excited to work with you and showcase what we have, and we are continuously developing both electrical and solar and also wind solutions that are very friendly to farmers, small-scale farmers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that's not a question, that's a marketing pitch. But if you see number 9 there on the screen, it actually talks about introducing tax exemption for irrigation equipment. And of course, you will need to be supplying more and more to our farmers. So I think that's a good one. With that, I have still 2 minutes to go. So if there's some more comment, I think I see Vikram Sharma next on screen. You want to make a comment?
Hi, thank you, Wimble. I actually asked the question in the chat, but let me just repeat it. So one of the recommendations mentioned is about partial subsidies. And I was just having a brief look at the irrigation technologies, or rather solar-driven irrigation technology in sub-Saharan Africa. And one of the challenges is very high upfront cost. So of course, financing is a big constraint. But when we consider subsidies, it's quite important we strike a balance between are these going to be long-term subsidies, because they often lead to some market distortion as well. So would be great to hear if anyone can share any example of any other country, maybe India, where the subsidies for solar-driven technologies, how they have panned out so far.
Thank you, Vikram. Gabriela or Aboud, any of you want to answer that?
I can start. So indeed, when if you will, when you provide partial subsidies, trying to support a given technology, you are effectively distorting the market because you are effectively trying to influence the decision of the farmer towards a given technology. But it can be done for the long-term benefits, because indeed these kind of technologies might be more sustainable. I think what is key here is try to understand how the partial subsidy will pan out over time in terms of trying to decrease that subsidy over time as solar becomes more widespread in the country. Indeed, I mean, the reduction of unit cost of solar is something absolutely impressive if we look at the unit cost of this equipment over the past 10 years. So ideally, what we would like to see is use of partial subsidy to give a first push push to the technology, and then as costs come out, subsidy progressively decreasing and then disappearing. And we are seeing this partial subsidy and decreasing subsidy also across African countries. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabriela. You have any closing remarks? So I need to close this session and go to our panel.
If I may add onto that, Remark, please,
Yeah,
on the
please
issue
go
of
ahead.
subsidy, because Gabriela has put it quite well in terms of equipment, but you're also looking at it in terms of infrastructure development, where right now the government is doing 100% grant in most of the projects. But now moving forward, as per our strategy and guidelines, we need the farmers to come in and also chip in some of cost sharing. So that's what we are saying. Maybe to be partial grant, partial now, the beneficiary to contribute. So that is the ideas that now we are floating moving forward. Thank you, Vimal.
Thank you, Bwana Aboud. Any closing comments from you, Bwana Aboud?
Thank you, Vimal. Thank you, everybody. I must say I'm very, very excited. Just the way when we first interacted with KEPSA, a lot of very good ideas came. And it's like we are all in agreement. You heard what Moses Kitheka from Davis Shatcliffe said, what Mwangi said in terms of the banking sector. So what we'll require is maybe further conversation so that as we come up with a project proposal, we can concretize most of these things, because I'm saying we are all on the same page. There's issues, there are things that we are doing, but they are not, they have not been shared. So it's becoming very, very important as we move forward. We come up with a platform where we can share the activities that we are carrying out and see how we can help each other. Thank you, Vimal. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Bwana Aboud. And Gabriela, final comments?
The only thing to say is that I see a lot of activity on the chat, and I will try to keep up as the rest of the conversation goes to provide some answers there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please answer them online. And with that, we go into the next session, which is a panel discussion. I would like to introduce here Vinay Vutukuru. And Vinay, I think you can now start moderating the next panel. He's a senior agriculture economist at the World Bank. All yours. You've got 20 minutes. Let's keep to time, and you can now moderate the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Vimal. And I can see I have a huge challenge to match up to the excellent way in which you moderated the session. But good morning, everyone. I think this is a great follow-on session. I hope all of you will like it. Basically, let me stop my video because I think the connection is a bit unstable. Hope you're able to hear me all.
Yes, Vinay, loud and clear.
Great, thank you. So we have a very impressive panel consisting of farmers and private sector leaders, I think, who are all implementers, practitioners, and who really understand the nuances of scaling up small-scale farmer-led irrigation. So really looking forward to hearing from these four gentlemen. Let me quickly introduce each one of them. Firstly, Mr. Ephraim Kehenya. He's a small-scale farmer himself and adopting irrigation, and he's a chair of the Water Users Association in Laikipia. We have Mr. Gerald Mudomi, who's the CEO of Melu Greens, which is a private off-taker. We have Mr. Dave Gavenda, who's the MD for Amaron, which is a leading agribusiness input and technology company. And we have Mr. Sylvans Otiano, who is the head of public sector banking at the Cooperative Bank of Kenya, which is a financial institution. Gentlemen, you have 3 minutes to answer my question. And at the end, I hope we'll have time to take a couple of comments from the audience. Let me start with a question to Mr. Ephraim Kehenya. Mr. Ephraim, I think based on your extensive experience, what do you think is the most important thing for an individual farmer, or what does it take for an individual farmer who's dependent on rainfall to adopt irrigation? So over to you, Mr. Ephraim. Mr. Ephraim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, please go ahead, Mr. Ephraim. I hope you heard the question.
Well, thank you very much for actually joining the meeting. Very, very good. Some of the topics we are actually discussing new issues that are there on the ground. And I can say that actually the issues affecting the farmer-led irrigation development, one of them is climate change. And climate change is an issue that we cannot be able to by tomorrow. And therefore we need to put irrigation. And out of experience of having being one of the lead farmers for the last 6 years, what we are doing on the ground is that we are encouraging our farmers to store water. So that is the most crucial issue. So we are doing on-farm storage through farm, and again encourage farmers going to technology, especially the safe use of water technology. The way we are doing it is that being a technician, we are encouraging farmers to excavate and line their dams, and from there we get water sources from. The most popular is rain harvest because not everybody has a river or a stream running across the farm. That one we've been able to succeed with a big milestone. Right now for this year alone, I've already done 30 million liters of water across the 5 counties that I'm operating on. That is Jerry, Nyandarua, Laikipia, Meru, and Isiolo. The other challenge that we've been having is the financial access. You know, with technology, there is the issue of the cost of technology, and the cost is quite high. I must agree, especially on issues to do with solar pumps and all that, and not as cheap as the other pumps that are motorized and using solar and the right. So on the financial access, what we did as a country is that we brought farmers together and we started a saving enterprise whereby the farmers bring their money into one basket and be able now to get out of what farmers have already saved. So we have an outlet that is called Sacco, that is a once of my users Sacco, and this is the entire is targeting farmers, and we are giving loans to farmers. Right now we've given over 3 million worth of loans and quite working, and you can see our network increasing. Right now we have 300, and we target that by the end of December we'll be having over 1,000 farmers who are benefiting from. So what we are doing, once we give the financial access, we are giving the technical tips. We are connecting the farmers now to the suppliers, especially the dam liners. We are connecting them now to the builders, and we have the technical arm that does help the farmers to choose the site where the farm can be done, and again the technology that right for the farmer. The other issue is on information. You understand that most farmers don't have information, and not unless we have some information, model farms that have information on the cloud, our farmers will still wade away and they'll still waste their resources and remain farmers who doesn't enjoy the farming as an opportunity. So we are creating information, we have platforms, we have WhatsApp group, and we are using that to share every available information to the farmers in time. The other issues of market access. Market access, we are looking at it that even if you have the technology, you have the production, and you are not contract farming or you don't have the access to market, then your products get wasted. So what we are doing is that we are looking at specific crops that are within the 5 countries we are working on. We are looking at the specific crop. We are looking at the elasticity of demand. We are looking at the high season and the low season, and we are advising farmers accordingly. And especially in this case, we are more or less going to fruits because we have realized that with fruits, farmers may not cost benefit analysis, and most of the farmers that have gone that way have been able to break even, enjoy and invest back to the farm. The last thing I'd like to share is about the agricultural practice. Realize that if the farmer doesn't have good agricultural practice, and especially issues of
Mr. Ephraim, if you can kindly wrap up in the next 30 seconds. So
so if the farmer
we have tight on time.
If the farmer doesn't practice good agricultural practice, then there will be a challenge. So to wrap up, let me say that the big challenge now lies on the cost of input. I've seen other speakers talk about this, and especially on the issue of dam liners, we need to have a policy that can subsidize this. And again, also on the circles, let's get somebody who can partner with us and thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Ephraim, for those very useful remarks. Let me now turn to Mr. Gerald. And the question to you, Mr. Gerald, is you can see that the diagnostics really highlighted the access to off-taker and markets as a key constraint. What would incentivize an off-taker like you to really work with a small-scale farmer? Over to you, Mr. Gerald, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Vinny, for asking the question and allowing me in. Can you hear me, Vinny?
Yes, very clearly, Gerald. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, my name is Gerald Mudomi, and I'm the proprietor of Meru Greens. I stand in the value chain gap, and basically managing primary production with smallholder farmers, aggregating, and of taking the same for value addition and then route to the markets. I've done this one for several years, more than 25 years. And I must admit here, without irrigation, we would not be in business. And irrigation has really assisted the smallholder farmers in acquiring high production from small unit areas, and they have made money from it. But of course, we are there adding value to the farmer on.
Gerald, you are muted for some reason. Can you unmute yourself? Mr. Gerald, there seems to be an issue at your end.
Management, economic aspects, financial knowledge to the smallholder farmers, because it must create margins, and the crop is well received for the value addition in our factory, or the fruits being ripened for the domestic and East African markets. So we are there with very organized groups. We keep on recruiting them every other time. The farmers can know of their gains, and there's excitement in the value chain because of the kind of money they are making. So being a value chain of taker, we have seen a lot of challenges in the irrigation schemes, especially the knowledge on how much water to apply. Farmers don't know, of course, things to do with infiltration rates. Farmers have challenges in when to irrigate, how much to irrigate, how do we construct the basins, the fallows, how do you allow water just to spread around, and what crop should be given a certain amount of water. If it is a green beans, farmers have realized doing it through drip, you make more, there's higher production, but they cannot access the drip kits because they're expensive. Also, those who buy them, they don't have the know-how on how to and implement them in their fields. So those challenges, because of capacity, are there with the farmers. And for sure, we cannot manage to go to every farmer to instruct him on what irrigation system to use. And but we have seen the youth, especially in Kirinyaga, who buy pipes, and on motorbikes they pull the pipes to different plot regions where they construct the small blocks or irrigation blocks. But this is from their own creation, and I must admit the youth and those in the field are doing a good job, because they don't know about the gradient, they don't know the sizes of the paddy blocks, but they are able to construct them and grow their onions, their tomatoes, or their green beans, and the crop comes out very well. But at the end of the day, they have wasted a lot of water, they have used a lot of labor, and the skills are not there. And this is why I'm excited to hear county irrigation units which can get into this gap and help our farmers. Other challenges that we get, because farmers are there, they find overhead systems very expensive. They want, of course, to see
Mr.
beauty of.
Gerald, sorry to interrupt you, but can you kindly wrap up in the next 30 seconds?
Yes, the farmers are excited to use the sprinklers, but the sprinklers the costs have been going up every other day. The taxes are there and they cannot afford. They also don't know the low and high pressure sprinklers. So technology is a big challenge to them, affordability and the skills. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gerald. Thank you for the very useful remarks. Let me now turn to Mr. Dave Govender. Dave, the question to you is, really as a leading agri-business kind of company, technology and input company, do you see a business opportunity in offering farmers credit in addition to irrigation equipment? Over to you, Dave.
Yes, thank you, Vinay, and greetings to everyone on the call. And I want to firstly say congratulations to the facilitators, organizers, and the earlier presenters. I think the quality of the presentation is not only timely, but of great importance to agribusiness, growth and stimulation in the economy right now. So really appreciate that. To answer your question, I think let me just step back a little bit. Amaranth Kenya has been a pioneer in drip irrigation technology and introduced this technology to Kenya decades ago. It's extremely well established in the larger scale sector, and we've sort of been the pioneers in the floriculture and the large scale horticulture sector. But several years ago, and not too different from what you've seen in the studies, we recognized the importance of the smallholder sector and the small scale sector and the importance to the growth of the economy and the larger contributors to food security in particular. Having said that, we looked at as a company, what's our strategic focus going forward? We already have the technologies. We have quite a lot of experience. We have expertise within the organization. And how do we position this within the small scale sector? And we started this probably around 5-6 years ago. And some of the learnings we come across, I think it's been debated, and I'm probably repeating myself, but it's very similar to what's already been discussed. Is how do you stimulate the growth and the adoption? Now, one of the key ones is, number one, is improving access to water. I think this is critical. Many parts of the country struggle with water supply, and we need to make sure that if we want to really implement and deploy irrigation systems, that access to water is critical. Number two, I think we need a wide, far-reaching awareness and knowledge program that's already been covered. I think gaps in knowledge and understanding about the benefits of irrigation tend to hold from adoption. And we need to create ways of publicizing why irrigation-enabled farming is an efficient use of water, and how this can stimulate and support and enable smallholder growth. And this is, again, an efficient use of time and resources. The third one is establishing a financial incentives and access to finance to make irrigation systems affordable. Here again, I think the word is a smart financing model. And I think we've heard earlier on that traditional financing models tend to be not user-friendly, if I can put it that way, to smallholder farmers. So certainly we need to think out of the box about, how do we stimulate the growth through a very smart financing model. And the fourth part is access to alternative energy, renewable energies, because not all farmers have access to plug-in power. And the last one, the fifth one, is obviously market access. Given the growth, you're going to have increased efficiencies in yield. That stimulates the sector, that makes you more accessible to sophisticated markets like exports? And how do you make sure that you get access to those markets? I think those are the 5 points we've already recognized as a company. And therefore, what we've positioned is what we call a package solution, including irrigation for the smallholder farmers. And this includes the product itself. We have already engaged into a alternative financing mechanism that looks at risk quite differently versus traditional financing models. And this is a differentiated solution that comes with product, finance, access to credit, technical expertise, after-sales service and support, agronomy know-how, and best practices based on our experience in the market. And this is the model that we are putting together and already have piloted into this market. We've had some great success. Now, I recognize adoption is not really exactly what we expected. A lot more work needs to be done in it. But I take exactly what I've heard all along from all the other questions and speakers, that we've seen these hurdles, and the solution is about providing this complete package that we can bring to the smallholder farmers. I hope that answers your question, Vinay.
Thank you, Mr. Dave. Thank you also for sticking to the time. That was very, very clear. I would now like to bring in Mr. Sylvain Sutiano into the discussion. Mr. Sylvain, you've heard that really kind of access to credit is a huge constraint as expressed by almost every stakeholder. So, the question to you is, do you really see a business case in lending to small scale farmers for irrigation? And what would motivate you to increase this lending? So over to you, Mr. Sylvain. Mr. Sylvain, I think you're muted. Can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that, Vinay. Thank you. I was saying to answer questions, yes, there is a business case for lending to farmers for banks in Kenya, and we've been doing that. Of course, there's a lot that needs to, much more that needs to be done, and what then now in terms of what will be the motivation factors which we see from a banking perspective and borrowing from the experience in cooperative bank dealing with the farmers are three key areas. One is the aggregation or forming the farmers into very structured groups. And for this, the model we propose as cooperative bank is cooperatives, because then the cooperatives in this country are very well structured and it's very regulated, which helps in even answering some of the participants' questions. Somebody, I think that was Dr. Manga from Kisumu, talking about too many schemes that are unregulated and it becomes a problem to manage. So cooperatives are very well regulated, there's a structure. The other thing on cooperatives, it gives the benefits, of course, of the economies of scale, making then production costs manageable and lower. There's the issue of then the farmers themselves able to co-guarantee one another, and in the co-guaranteeing one another for access to credit helps in two areas. One, the issue of collateral securities is managed because for cooperative bank, we accept the crops. And then number two is the peer management and holding one another accountable, so that funds then that are lent to them through the cooperatives, they then now ensure each and every person uses the funds well, because it impacts on the entire members of the group. The other one for the cooperatives will also help them even in having, because it's aggregated, they are together, they have a better bargaining power in terms of access to markets and prices. It also helps them in terms of management of post-harvest. when the harvest time is there, they're able to come up together and invest in storage facilities so that they are not selling at a throwaway price because everybody has harvested. So that's very critical, a very critical factor and for banks. Number two is the matter of credit guarantee or a revolving fund. The government runs quite a number of such programs in other areas, like even in the SME sector. And this would also help because it helps the risk, the issue. And then two, it also is a support to the bank's liquidity, as I think somebody mentioned from SMEP, so that you then now have some capital injected in that area. And then a portion of it, then now the banks put in there also part of the capital, helps in terms of one, the issue of risk is lower. Two, the eventual cost of credit to the farmer gets much, much lower because then now there's also part of government's funding that. Number three is the issue of consideration for insurance cover for crop failure. And crop failure would come even in under irrigation systems. Should there be pests, if it's vegetables or is it in wheat or is it in rice? Drought, some areas the drought could affect even source of water themselves. Two, and then it could also floods in the event that there's too much rain and floods and some of those waterways are damaged. What happens to the farmer? So if then there is an insurance arrangement for that, it becomes quite helpful. And the government already ran some of those through Ministry of Agriculture, where we're also participating in Cooperative Bank, the Kenya Cereals Enhancement Program. Those in the ministry will appreciate that, an insurance program that helps and then gives a big incentive also for banks and an incentive even for farmers. They then now have the courage to go into their farms and work on that. The last one is working together with the various stakeholders and just ensuring that there is enough capacity building, training for the farmers and training for to the management of the farmer organizations. If it's the managers within the cooperatives, and we, as a bank, we participated in that. We work together with the cooperatives to train the managers, the staff, and the farmers themselves to ensure that there's a right skills in terms of how they manage their production, how they manage the entire value chain until the markets. Finally, just to give you an example of how it makes sense to us as a bank, for farmers that are in cooperatives, what we even normally do, once they have delivered to the stores that are managed within the cooperatives, even before they sell, we are then able to support them with advance.
Mr. Sylvans, sorry to interrupt you. Could you kindly wrap up in the next 30 seconds?
Just finishing that, Vinay. The advance then helps them before they have sold their produce. They have money to at least to live on and also to go back to their farms and to their produce as they wait for the best prices in the season. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Sylvans. I must say, I think I'm fortunate to have four wonderful panelists who've shared, I think, very rich kind of experience on, really issues related to scaling up of small-scale irrigation. We have time for perhaps one quick comment from the audience. If you could kindly raise your hand, we could kind of invite you. Anybody from the audience would like to make any comment, question specifically on some of the issues raised by the panelists? Joy, am I missing any kind of thing? Please do let me know if I'm missing, if somebody is wanting to make a comment.
I don't see any hand up at the moment. I'm trying to look through the chat box now.
I see Daniel, Douglas have their hands up, as well as Moses. Yes. So Daniel, Douglas, or Moses.
Yeah. Daniel, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel and Tomailos. I'm the CEO of the Kenya National Farmers Federation, KNAF. I have posted a few questions on the chat box, but let me ask this directly, particularly to Otieno from Cooperative Bank, and then Mudomi of Meru Grains. KNAF, as maybe some people may know, others may not, is a National Farmers Organization. And I've heard Otieno say that they prefer, obviously, since this is Cooperative Bank, they prefer dealing with cooperatives, and that is fine. But it is important for people like Otieno and Mudomi to know that KNAF, which really is a National Farmers Union, is started as a Kenya National Farmers Union, only that the name has changed. We do also have a very elaborate organizational structure that starts from the ward level, the sub-county, the county, up to the national level. And other than, of course, representing the interests of farmers through lobby and advocacy in Kenya, we do also offer member services, and this includes organizing farmers in different entities. Some of them we call producer business groups, others we call common interest groups, others we call, we have a membership category called commodity associations. And we do also have elaborate capacity building for these farmer groups, farmer associations, farmer alliances. So it would be interesting if a cooperative bank would also consider that, because I realize, and most Kenyans realize, when banks say that they are offering credit to farmers, really it is lip service, because farmers are considered, very high risk. But if you really talk with farmers, or you talk with a farmer organization like KNAF, will tell you that banks do not understand farmers, and it would help if an aggregator like Meru Grains or a bank like Cooperative Bank would come to KNAF and say, how do we deal with farmers? How do we really assess the risk? How do we make a follow-up? How do we train farmers? How do we offer this capacity building so that they see whatever it is that they are doing from our perspective as a banker that is willing to give them credit. So it is important that farmers organizations are engaged, because that really lacks in a lot of credit schemes that we have in Kenya targeted at agriculture. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel, and I think you made a good point. Unfortunately, we do not have time for Mr. Gerald and Mr. Otieno to kind of respond. If you could kindly do so on the chat, that will be excellent. Douglas and Moses, unfortunately, we don't have time. So if you can kindly post your comments, questions on the chat platform, that will be great. Unfortunately, it's 11:32, so my time is up. I think, Vimal, if you allow me, I just want to say one last thing to wrap up this panel.
Alafu useme mambo ya nyama, lakini nenda kuisha.
Yeah, just one last thing to kind of wrap up this panel. First to thank each one of the four panelists for excellent remarks. My sense is that I think we have very rich kind of perspectives here from the farmers, from the private sector, and the financial institution, both on the private sector, both on the input side and the output side. And I think this gives a very good kind of indication to the public sector as to the role, the facilitative role they could play to connect farmers to both the input market, the output market, and the financial institution. So I hope all of you enjoyed this panel. I'd like to hand over this back to Vimal now. Over to you, Vimal.
Thank you, Vinay. Thank you very much for ably chairing, and also the four speakers. Thank you very much. So we have got that perspective from the private sector on what it takes to have the farmers in the driver's seat. We now move on to a much more detailed section in terms of what it, it's in terms of perspectives from policymakers and business leaders. And I would like to introduce here Catherine Tovey, who is the Water Practice Manager, Africa East at the World Bank. And Catherine will now, moderate the next session for 30 minutes. And Catherine, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vimal, and fantastic to be here. I have to say, it's an incredibly exciting event when we see sort of 130 people connected from such a, the breadth is fantastic, and I think over 100 comments in the chat. So I think, you know, really congratulations to everybody, and this is precisely the point of being here. I think we have a really interesting, you know, sort of 10-step framework for action, for really sort of unlocking this potential sort of transformation for farmer-led irrigation and millions of farmers. And we kind of somehow know a lot of the solutions, but bringing these all together in a sort of a clear framework, and hearing the perspectives of everybody on each of these interventions, I think is what makes it sort of very powerful, so we can have some coordinated action to really make a difference. And I think fascinating discussion, listening to from the farmers, and what it takes to unlock all the markets and the inputs and outputs and financial institutions. And as you're saying, Vimala, we're now going to be shifting gears and looking at that sort of elusive enabling environment, and what does it take to make things more attractive for farmers, whether it's to get access to water, or for sort of the private sector to go to some areas where it is hard to reach. And so the framework provides a number of interventions to support this enabling environment. And we have again a fantastic and stellar panel today with us to discuss some of these thorny issues and what the public sector can and should be doing. So I have 30 minutes, and I want to make sure that we have as much time as possible to listen to each and every one of them. So let me sort of first of you introduce them. So my understanding is that it will be actually Richard Cowney rather than Professor Hamadi, who will be representing the Ministry of Agriculture today, the engineering secretary. And then we will have Albert Mwaniki, who's the chair of the CCM's caucus for agriculture and irrigation. And so we'll get to go down not just at the national level, as we've been talking, but very much to hear from the counties, which are obviously extremely important interface with the actual sort of farmers. We then have Agatha Thuo, who's the general manager for the agriculture sector network at KEPSA. And then last, but certainly not least, we'll get to hear again from Aboud Mueva, the irrigation secretary from the Ministry of Water. So really fantastic panel. And let me turn over then, I think, as I say, I think it is Richard Cowney representing Professor Hamadi today. And with the following sort of question. Right, we know that there's a need to expand irrigation at a much faster rate, but at the same time, we need to be organizing the farmers and linking them to those markets. So the question for you is how can digital transformation increase the impact of the Ministry of Agriculture in conducting these all elusive market linkages for farmers? So over to you. Oh, and sorry, just by the way, I have, in the spirit of football, I have my yellow card, and I will put on my video when we're just wrapping up, and then I will put my yellow card if needed. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I'll try to be brief. I'm Engineer Richard Kanui, representing the PS. Professor Madiba was not able to be with us today. Let me start by saying, of all Congress, that 80% of our farmers, 80% of our farmers, small-scale farmers, whether irrigated or not irrigated. So they are key to our production. And we've been looking at how to assist these farmers, to work with these farmers. And we're following the big four value chain approach. We have realized that works very well with all the players on board. Of course, from the seeding up to irrigation, then value addition, post-harvest management and marketing. And that's what we are doing. But let me narrow down to marketing. We've been having many projects in the ministry that have been working on themselves. I mean, individually, they have come with marketing strategies, platforms that are given as information, that are given as now experience on how we expand to the national value, the whole nation. And as a ministry, we've realized that unless these farmers make market, unless farmers sell their produce, then production will not be possible. So what are we doing as a ministry? We've realized the power of digital platform, digital transformation in market, and we have formed a digital platform that covers the whole country. In phase one of this digital platform, which we include all stakeholders, we are collecting data from 235 markets, 235 main markets, and we are targeting 5 markets per every county, the major markets. Of course, we get real-time data from those markets and post them to the platform. Now, the aim of collecting this data, the data is collected on the supply volumes, how much being supplied to those markets, what's the origin of those supplies, and then the pricing, both the wholesale and retail. That we feel that to give proper information to the farmers is a plan. We're also getting cross-border trade. We are monitoring at the boundaries, so I can know the price and volume that are coming in. This will inform our farmers on the gaps that are there and where we need to go. Because there will be no need of growing what is coming from other countries, and we will be able to measure other crops. So basically, this is a platform that we have started. We're working closely with the county governments. Most of our data collectors are from counties, and we have been trained. We hope it will be able to pick well. Now, this information we hope to be able to give farmers, guide farmers on what to do, what to sell, what to produce. Also consumers, because you will be able to see where to get what they want, and then all the value chain actors can be able to link in that platform, and be able to see what is expected and how the market is working. Now, this will also help decision making. If a farmer wants to make a decision, or any group wants to make, or any supplier wants to make a decision, this is a very strong tool. The good thing is that we are in every county, and therefore this information is being shared everywhere. Now, after this one we have tested, we already collect this data. I think is online now. We are moving to the second phase of our program. We are working closely with a project that are funded by World Bank, ADB. We have several project stakeholders that are supporting us in this. So in the second phase of this, we want to bring on board a virtual market where you can meet virtually, you can really talk virtually, you can express yourself. We are registering transporters, registering other sector actors, so that they can interact virtually. And farmers can engage, and transact virtually. We feel is the way forward. We are still on this, and we feel that it's going to work well. Now, these two interventions on the market.
Sorry, I'm really sorry, Richard. You are out of time. Maybe 10 seconds to wrap up.
Sorry?
I'm afraid you are out of time. The 3 minutes, we're having to be very strict on the 3 minutes, and they're up. So 10 seconds maybe for the concluding remark.
Thank you. I'm just saying that what we have collected with the two model, with the virtual system, will be able to help the policymakers both at the national and county level and county account level in monitoring food security, which is very important for our country, for advisory to farmers, and also enterprise selection. We also meant to identify gaps. So the next step would be now expanding the market so that we can be able to collect data from 10 markets. And give proper information on each county. So we feel that this is the way to go. We have seen the power of digital transformation, digital movement. And this is the way to go. So that's the match we've been able to achieve. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And indeed, I think the power of a national level platform to really bring more and more market data and connect the value chains is going to be so important. We'll now indeed move down a level and very much get the perspective from the counties, the all-important sort of counties. And so to Albert Waniki, a question for you on, right, we've talked a lot in the chat about the need to really bring this support to the farmers down to the county levels in supporting the various initiatives. So what are the incentives that you think that counties required to fast track the establishment of these all-important county irrigation development units? Because without them, and without having, I guess, the extension workers within them supporting hand in hand this outreach, that's obviously a key piece of the puzzle. So over to you, Albert.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much. First of all, disclaimer, I'm not HE. I have seen an abbreviation before my name, but that's a title that I can achieve in the future, which can be also very good. I think coming to the issue of incentives, as far as the CDUs are concerned, county irrigation development units, this is a thought process. It's already a thought process, and as counties, we have really put a lot of thought into this. Remember, we would want to have these people to be from the mainstream staffing levels that we already have, and we have suggestions that probably the composition of the CDUs could be officers that are drawn from irrigation department, officers who are drawn from crops department, and also the regulatory departments within the county. Of course, regulatory departments are drawn from the national government, but in the spirit of collaboration, we collaborate together. Why do we need this? Because we would want to have, and of course at the county level, but we would also want to have this cascaded down to the sub-county level. And these are people who will work to bridge the gap between government and the private sector farmer who is considered to be a private holder. Now, they are all probably, and of course the incentive, as you asked, is the support from government. And these are people who are within the counties, and these are people who are already employees of the county government and of course national government. And also they are people who need to be supported in terms of facilitation. But of course, where we need to come in is what is their work and what is their role. Their role is mainly to bridge that gap. And of course, identifying and working with farmers to identify and offer guidance on the requirements, particularly on taking up the smallholder or farmer-led small-scale irrigation development. But we also need to look into other incentives in terms of looking at the cost of water. You notice that priority in this country is on domestic water, which is also good. But in terms of irrigation water, there is an incidental cost that goes into it from regulatory authorities. All the waters are metered. And we also would want to propose that we also look into the cost of water for irrigation. And this, working with the regulatory bodies like WRA, Water Regulatory Authority, we can be able to quickly address that. Looking at the other proposals that have been made before, the investment portfolio is also key for us. And this will depend on the kind of crop, the target crop for the irrigation, and the gravity and the intensity and the size of the irrigation scheme that we are talking about. Considering probably irrigation schemes that target cereal crops like rice, you may think that a model that like smallholder irrigation development, farmer-led, may work or may not work very well. And therefore, it is also important for us to look at a hybrid model where we are talking about a system where there is participation of the private sector, and also bridging that gap and ensuring that we can also get development partners, we can also get government coming in. Because if you look at Pakera, if you look at Kano, we are looking at different irrigation schemes or the scale, and also looking at the arid and semi-arid areas. We are looking at feedlot systems.
Albert.
And we also need, yes,
I'm afraid we are out of time again.
Very well, but this is what we intend to do, and we are ready. We are ready to have CDUs in place, and we are able to work with them. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think your last point on the arid areas is, I think, a perfect segue to Agatha, because we know that, you know, one of the big questions here is also what can the public sector do to support the underserved counties and make them more attractive for the private sector to come in, including for business opportunities for irrigation services. So how do we get to that last mile, both these underserved counties, but also the harder to reach individual farmers that we've seen have such a great sort of potential here? Agatha, over to you.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and good morning, everyone. My name is Agatha. Like you've seen, I'm the General Manager, Agriculture Sector Network, and I just wanted, in a nutshell, to explain that ASNET is the umbrella body for private sector actors in Kenya. We've consolidated the private sector so that together we can speak in one voice in agriculture. And essentially, ASNET was what was formerly the Agriculture Sector Board at KEPSA. I think some of the issues that I want to mention have already been mentioned quite extensively. That one of the roles that we see as private sector government playing is the business enabling environment role, and the government should be as facilitative as possible. The government needs to look at policies, and not just policies to do with the irrigation, but there is need for us to look for at a comprehensive value chain analysis and related value chain policies, so that the farmers, the smallholder farmers, can have a very effective and sustainable irrigation ecosystem. It's very, very important. It was also mentioned that knowledge in area presentations depends on both the public sector and the private sector. And it's just about time we agreed that the private sector has a key role in capacity building, and hence the need for the private sector to participate together with the public sector in knowledge dissemination, technology dissemination in partnership with the public sector. There is need also for the public sector to invest more in research. Research is very, very important so that farmers have the right technology, right from farm input supply all through to the markets. Very important. And I think for ourselves, again, there is need to encourage and build capacity of pastoralists to integrate in crop and livestock production by providing, and the government needs to provide the requisite technology in the ASAO areas, particularly where the private sector's presence is not quite prominent, especially technologies in crop and pasture seed provision. The government also needs to introduce water technologies to serve livestock and crop production in those areas. And again, the government's role also should become more and more regulatory. And I think this is in government policies that we need to see more of continued regulation by the government, other than government taking up what the private sector should actually be doing. So let the public sector not construct, let them not procure equipment, but facilitate the private sector to be able to do this, because I believe the private sector can do it better, can maintain the equipment better. And I needed to mention that ASNET is doing a splendid job of bringing this private sector together. Sorry, just 30 more seconds. Private sector is has brought together ASNET has brought together the private sector, so that together with the government, we need to work in a partnership so that we deliver the appropriate technologies to the communities. I will stop there in the interest of time. Thank you very much.
I know it's very, very short, but some very, very important points. And I think this notion of public-private partnerships and more R&D in the constraints that the ASALs are facing and so on to crowd in the private sector are very, very important. Now, last but not least, over to Abud, and I think we have, in this panel, there's been an interesting sort of tension, right? It's come up on one hand, sort of calls for keeping both paying attention when it comes to the importance of water policies and water sort of sustainability on one hand, but also making sure that we are catering to individual farmers as well as collectives, and being mindful of the costs and the potential barriers for small-scale individual farmers when it comes to abstracting water. So I guess the question is, what are the incentives that the ministry is putting in place to ensure that we have a sort of a formalization around managing these competing needs for water. And we know that Kenya is an extremely water scarce sort of country. So how do we formalize this and ensure that this resource is used sustainably, but I guess also inclusively? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. And good morning once again. As you've rightly put it, water is a very, very scarce resource in this country. And studies have shown that about 70% of water usage actually supposed to be goes to irrigation. And this calls for sustainable use of water resource. As a country, it is required by law that all water abstractors get a water permit. So the Water Resource Authority is the one that coordinates this activity. So it's a requirement that any irrigator applies for a water permit so that he or she, or maybe this group, can access to water. This one, to some very good extent, provides assurance to the user of water resource availability. So it's more or less like an incentive to him or to the group. And it also assists WRA to carry out one of its mandate of reinvesting whatever they collect to water basin conservation to ensure sustainability of the resource. In the irrigation regulations that I had mentioned earlier that were done last year, we have also put a lot of emphasis in ensuring that this one is complied to, so that at least the water resource can be there for our future generations. I know there could be challenges here and there. Quite a number of entities, quite a number of individual irrigators actually try to desist from, paying for this water permit or maybe applying for this water permit. But we are doing a lot of sensitization. All this is for their good. Only thing is we need to sort out a few issues here and there in terms of affordability of the rates. When it comes to the issue of formalization of fleet, I think let me start by making a clarification. We cannot say that fleet is totally informal in this country. As I said earlier, community-based is a formal way of doing business as far as irrigation is concerned. It's only that individual irrigators has not been formalized. But all in all, in the Irrigation Act, we have recognized, as I said earlier, the critical role Irrigation Water Users Association can play in the country. The same has been recognized in the irrigation strategy, especially the individual irrigators. We acknowledge that moving forward, if you are going to exploit the potential we have to give more emphasis to individual irrigators. And this calls for, this will open doors for possible financial support for group-based and individual irrigators. We are also encouraging, and it's one of the recommendations in our presentation today, formation of common interest groups that can be able to access support in terms of smart subsidies, as it was articulated very well by the Amiran friend, also have access to grants and markets. So the moment these viewers or the individual irrigators aggregate, it will open doors or avenues for more support. So that is how we are looking at it, and that is what we as a ministry, we as a government together, that both the national and the county governments are trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you also for keeping to time. I know we're running a little bit over, so I'm assuming from the chairs that we don't have questions for time for live question. Is that correct?
Well, if you got one comment or a question, you can go ahead with that.
Okay, has anybody got a hand up? Can anybody see? I can't see any hands.
Yes, just a quick one. Now,
please go ahead, Wilson.
Yes, I think I was happy to hear from Agatha the emphasis on ASALs, and I would like to believe that this time round the ASALs do not miss out on this very important initiative on irrigation. In this context, can Abud or Tanui tell us, what do you have to encourage water harvesting in the two ministries? Water harvesting, what is the way forward on water harvesting to make this irrigation even more sustainable? Thank you.
Thank you, Wilson. Abud, in maybe 30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. I think, thank you also for that very good question. In my presentation, I gave an example of one of the interventions that the ministry is doing. We are having a household water harvesting program, which in the last 2 years, we've managed to do 26,000 water pans of a small size between 1,000 to 3,000 cubic meters. To us, this is a major breakthrough in terms of irrigation in this country. And if it can be upscaled by various agencies, to us, it will be a very good way forward in terms of individual irrigators. Thank you.
Fantastic. And Vimal, maybe if I may, in 2 seconds, sort of wrapping up, I think this extremely rich sort of panel and a very important point also made by Abud at the end of, this isn't about an informal sort of system. This is also about trying to formalize individual farmers as much as water user associations under this umbrella, so that every group can be supportive and we once again remember that there is no one size fits all, but a lot of support required to sort of unlock this. And I think one of my sort of big takeaways is really on how if we can get this model right. And I think we have all the partners around the table to really achieve this. Not only can we go sort of 3 times as faster than business as usual, but at sort of half the cost, and the financing at the end of the day remains a very important part, and farmers themselves have an important part to play in contributing to those costs. Obviously, we talked about also the support that the governments at different levels can do, and with the World Bank hat, just to say that we are really privileged to be part of this conversation, and certainly happy to continue sort of thinking through how we can support on both the potential financing, but also on bringing global knowledge to solve this wicked problem, and continuing to discuss this with you. So thank you so much. I've been blown away by the diversity and activity of participation and the richness of the discussions, and I feel very, very confident as we now sort of wrap up and think about next steps. I think this is a really exciting sort of moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you very much for really, keeping up to time, and nobody was yellow carded. Thank you to all the 4 speakers for really, giving us the insights. And now we have the government's view, we have the private sector view. So I think that's quite crucial. The question now is, if we look at action plan, because we need to come to a close, but this subject is so important and so vital, as Catherine put it, and I think also Vinay put it. Let's just add on 10 more minutes to this whole discussion, and is that okay with everyone? So that I can just close this session together with our CAS, Andrew Tuimur, who has now joined us. So I think overall, when we look at the actions coming out from all this, Joy, would you like me to get to clear up the action points first, or do you want us to have our CAS give us call to action and closing remarks first?
I think it'll be good to hear from you, call to action on behalf of private sector, and then we can have the CAS bring everything together from the government side.
Thanks a lot. We won't take too much time, but I think overall, fantastic discussion for the last 2 hours, and I think it's worth it. The issue was we aroused people to say, let's discuss this topic, and also have role clarity in terms of who's going to play what role. So there is a role for private sector, there is a business opportunity here, and I think it's very clear. When we're working with the small-scale farmers in various services, including financial services, and I'm glad all the financial people are also on board. The technology guys, they've got the technology and the execution ability in order to make this happen. And of course, the extension services, which may or may not be public, maybe private sector, giving extension services. And of course, offtake markets for farmers' produce. I think that's going to be quite crucial. So really to implement all these proposed interventions that we're talking about, ultimately, why do we irrigate? If you look at the screen in front of you, why do we irrigate? It's because we want to produce something good. And with that value add, local value add from agriculture, I think we can really mobilize this much faster. Because at the end of it all, what is agriculture about? It's about water, sun, and nutrients. And the minute we apply all these together, I think it works. And water being a big, big issue right now, we've tackled that problem. And I think if you look at what's on the screen right now, if we implement, not if, I say when we implement, I wouldn't say if right now, I think it's all aligned, we're all together on this one. But when we implement all these 10 or 9 or 10 points that we've got here, the interventions that we're talking about, we're in business. Again, public sector will clearly say we are facilitators. We allow this to happen. And therefore, we don't need to have persuasions to interact with farmers. I think farmer-led irrigation is something that's very, very important. And it's need-based. The need is there. The requirement is there. All we need to do is do the do-how and the know-how and bring it all together. And I think the issue around the government role to be able to say, let us create the right environment for us to engage in the interventions and really including whether it's digital platforms or physical platforms, whatever we can to really bring down the transaction costs and to make it more effective and more efficient and really more attractive for private sector to engage. And I think there are many more issues available. I think every private sector can be inclusive. It's not about saying this or that. And this is not a aid project. This is something that is really trade, and we can lead it and say farmers can lead this and make this happen. Ultimately, also, we need increased coordination. And I emphasize this 10 times more. Increased coordination between all levels of government, national and county and across sectors. Whether it's agriculture, whether it's water, whether it's finance, it's important that they realize that these interventions are crucial and we remove a lot of the silos that we see in government. And I think this is something where we all on a mission. If we're climbing Mount Kenya, we're all together on the climbing Mount Kenya. Let's go get this done. So with farmer-led, irrigation development, I think it is absolutely critical to say, let's all work together. Ultimately, the farmer will be the beneficial owner of all this. And really, that's how we get development done. So I think with that, the small-scale irrigation, you've seen the figures from what Gabriela put up there. We can share these slides with you and you've got them all accessible. But ultimately, it's about making it more sustainable and really fit for purpose. So with that, I would like to, this slide will be shared with you, of course, but I'd like to invite our Chief Administrative Secretary, Andrew Tuimore, to give us his call to action and his closing remarks. Thank you. Buenos dias, are you there? Joy, do we have him here?
Yes, I can see he's online.
Yes. Yes, I'm there, Vimal. I hope you can hear me well.
Now we can. Thank you. Now we can. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you so much, Vimal. My apologies for not joining late. Had a few technical issues. Also apologies from the Cabinet Secretary who would have liked to join us, but she wasn't able. But really, I've listened to some of the discussions, and it's really it's a topic that is very, very important for us. This multi-stakeholders event, of course, to talk about the farmer-led irrigation is very key for us as a ministry. And my colleague Abud has brought in some of the issues that the ministry is doing. Of course, irrigation is very key, and that is why in our Vision 2030 plan, irrigation is right there at the top. And of course, with the idea that we can irrigate about 1 million hectares by the 2030.
Buenos dias, can I intervene for a second? Your camera is not showing us your face. We need to have the camera spot onto your face, please. Thank you, so we can see your body language. Thank you.
Can you see me now? I hope you can see me now.
We can't. Please move the camera down and we need to see your full face. You can continue talking while you adjust your camera, no problems.
I think I'm using my phone actually because my iPad, you know. So I hope it will be well.
Well, I continue. It's okay.
Okay, so what I'm saying is we have increasing the agricultural production by about 400%, and we can create about 15 jobs per person per hectare, which is quite a feat. And really, despite all this, our potential under irrigation is only 2% area under irrigation, and we have a potential of about 18% at the moment, which is exploited, which is really still low. And that's why really, as government, we've come in to stress the importance of irrigation, and this multi-stakeholders meeting is very key for us. We have done quite a bit, which Buddha's mentioned. I don't want to repeat because of time. But as a ministry, we've also put in place reforms that we feel, and policy reforms that we feel will help the sector. And really, we want to work together with the private sector, with the World Bank, all the other actors, the county governments, the Water Resource Group, and all the others, so that we all are on the same page. And if we do this, we believe we should be able to increase our area under agriculture substantively. It's been shown that there's a lot of irrigation that is smallholder irrigation that is going on, which may not be documented. And really, we need to have a platform of sharing what is going on in the country. And we believe the private sector can really come in on this. And of course, develop project proposals that can help enhance this sector. So I just want to inform the meeting that we will work together as government, bring in what the private sector and all the other actors would require, so that we ensure that we actually develop the area under irrigation. Because a multi-stakeholder team which was put in place has shown that this can be done, and if we all work together as a team. So I want to just say that we as government, we are ready to work together with the private sector and all the other actors in that aspect. So we will move on from here and see the resolutions that we'll get from the meeting and see what we can implement and what we can support as government. Thank you so much, Vimal.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for that comment from the CAS. With that, we actually come to the end of this. I think a lot of stuff has been shared on the chats. All the documents are available. This is an all-inclusive process. So yes, you can participate. Yes, we need your inputs. And yes, everybody has a role here. So thank you very much. And thank you to organizers, Joy, and the whole team out there for really handling this well. Thank you to the World Bank. Thank you to the Water Resource Group. And have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chairman.